weren't they like the first or the biggest Samoan rap crew all time?
Yeah.
And didn't they do security for Eminem a little bit when M used to come out to the West Coast? Is that correct?
Yeah, he reached out. He was getting extorted by some Crips.
Who, Paul Rosenberg was,
Or
or Eminem?
Eminem was getting extorted by some Crips.
Meaning that they're saying you can't come out here unless you pay us.
This is when I knew Eminem was real. He's like, I don't give a f, man. This is when I knew, I'm like, damn, Eminem is a real 50 niggas.
LA is probably one of the most dangerous places for rappers. Do you believe that's true?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because, I mean, everybody be checking in. That's y'all favorite thing to do, check in with somebody that's gonna rob you, stupid.
Eminem isn't exactly the first name that comes to mind when you think of a gangster rapper. He's not out here throwing up gang signs or claiming a set, and he never built his career off that image. But here's the thing, when it comes to standing his ground, M has proven to be more gangster than most so-called street rappers. Every time someone has tried to press him, check him, or intimidate him, he never backed down. In fact, he's often been one of the first to step up and face the situation head on.
Him is non-confrontational. He's not a beef. He's not a real, like, you know, like who could, he not like the old Beanie Siegel, but he from Detroit. He from Detroit, man. He's from 8 Mile, bro. And I don't know, 20, 30 minutes ago, we talked about all his. So yeah, of course, M was raided.
And one of the craziest moments that proved this was when certain gangs tried to force Eminem to check in. If you don't know what checking in means, here's the deal. When rappers, celebrities, or high-profile figures travel to cities with heavy gang activity, especially places like Los Angeles, local gangs sometimes expect them to check in. It's supposed to be about showing respect, like acknowledging, hey, I know I'm in your territory, let's keep things cool. But the thing is, checking in isn't always about respect. More often than not, it's just a fancy way of extorting people. The gangs might demand money, expect rappers to do free features for their artists, or force them into business deals that benefit the gang. And if someone refuses, there are consequences.
You better check in. Imagine, I say I'm gangster. Crip. Straight up. Crip. Straight up. Crip.
Some artists go along with it just to keep the peace. They figure it's like paying for protection, so they can move around without worrying about drama. Others, though, aren't with the program. And Eminem was definitely one of those who wasn't having it. So when the Crips tried to press Eminem, expecting him to check in or show some form of submission, things took a wild turn. Instead of backing down or trying to negotiate his way out of it, M had an ace up his sleeve, the Booya Tribe. Now, if you don't know about Booya Tribe, they weren't just some random rap group. They were deeply connected to the Samoan gangs in Los Angeles.
We all got some gangster shit coming this Saturday, man.
What?
And if you know anything about gang culture, you'd know Samoan gangs, especially the Sons of Samoa, are nothing to play with. They may come across as laid back, cool, and easygoing, but when they feel disrespected or threatened, things can get ugly real quick.
Did you catch this? 100% Samoan. Lift up your shirt, bro. Lift up your shirt. Lift up your shirt. Show your tap. Look at that. Samoan.
And these were the guys that Eminem had in his corner. In fact, Monsta Gunja, the nephew of one of the Booya members, later confirmed this in an interview. He talked about how his uncles and their squad served as unofficial security for Eminem during his time in LA, making sure no one messed with him. And in return, M showed them major love by jumping on their track 911. That's how that song Hip Hop is in a State of 911 with Booya Tribe and Be Real came about. Paul Rosenberg, Eminem's manager, reached out because Eminem was getting extorted by some Crips, but Booya wasn't about to let that happen. They stepped in and protected Eminem.
And didn't they do security for Eminem a little bit when M used to come out to the West Coast? Is that correct?
Yeah, Eminem was getting extorted by some Crips.
Meaning that they're saying you can't come out here unless you pay us, or...
Yeah.
If you listen to that song, you'll catch Eminem dropping references to his heavy-hitting Samoan backup. Everywhere we go, people know we roll deep as F40, 50 Salmons. They knowin' when Debo was.
Everywhere we go, people know we roll deep as 40, 50 Samoans. They knowin' when Debo was.
This might also explain why Eminem never seemed scared of Suge Knight, even though Suge had a reputation for being one of the most intimidating figures in the music industry. One of the Booya members even mentioned in an interview that Suge himself was scared of them.
Like, what's up? Suge Knight scared of you. Suge Knight scared of you. And then everyone I talked to, they were, man, is Suge really this, really that? I was like, I'm Samoan, man. I don't give a I don't care. You King Kong, you Godzilla, you gonna get your ass beat.
The beef between Eminem and Suge doesn't get talked about as much as you'd expect, but it's one of those stories that reveals just how wild the music scene was back then. It all goes back to Dr. Dre leaving Death Row Records, when Dre signed Eminem and later brought 50 Cent into the fold. Suge already had bad blood with Dre, so when Eminem and 50 started making serious waves in the industry, they basically inherited Dre's beef with Suge, and Suge being Suge, he wasn't about to let it slide. He tried messing with them on multiple occasions. Take, for example, the time when 50 Cent was filming the music video for Inda Club. Out of nowhere, someone yelled, "Suge Knight is here." That single sentence threw the entire set into chaos. Suge showed up with about 30 men, reportedly members of a Mexican gang.
I always respected Eminem, 50, and that was with us. So Suge came, he had some Mexican. Now we from New York. You ain't never seen a nigga with a tattoo on his forehead. He just lights the cigar, and it's the about Suge. He light the cigar, and he trying to see what you gonna do. So Eminem, 50, everybody outside.
It was a classic Suge move, rolling up with a squad, trying to intimidate everyone on the scene. This was how Suge operated, always ready to pull up unannounced, flex his influence, and remind everyone that he was still a force to be reckoned with. Amidst this tension, Eminem was also present at the video shoot. True to form, Eminem did not back down.
This is when I knew Eminem was real. He's like, I don't give a man. This is when I knew, I'm like, damn, Eminem is a real. These niggas, 50 niggas outside, what's up?
Then there's the story from the 2001 Source Awards, which could have gone south real fast. Eminem was there performing with his group D12, and like any major awards show, the vibe was already tense. Normally, artists could have their bodyguards nearby at these events, but for some reason, the rules that night required bodyguards to sit separately from the artists. That left M in a vulnerable spot, which Suge and his crew didn't hesitate to exploit.
M was walking to his seat, I'm standing off to the side, and M was cut off on his way to his seat, and all these guys in red shirts surrounded him. And I'm looking at M's face, and I'm looking at these guys, I'm like, something ain't right.
According to Eminem's former bodyguard, Big Naze, things got sketchy fast. M ended up surrounded by a group of intimidating guys wearing red shirts, a clear signal they were affiliated with the Bloods, the gang Suge Knight was known to have ties to. Big Naz quickly realized something was off and sprinted across the venue to get to Eminem. He said it was obvious these guys had been sent by Suge.
He said, death row, motherfucker, this death row about, this death row life. I was like, death row, what's it got to do with him? He said, hey man, Suge sending a message.
Things between Suge Knight and Eminem escalated to a whole new level during a crazy incident in Hawaii. According to Eminem's former bodyguard, Big Naz, there was some serious intel that Suge had plans to harm Eminem during an event that was supposed to be nothing more than a casual getaway. But this wasn't just some vague, low-key threat. Apparently, Suge sent more than 50 of his guys all the way from Los Angeles to Hawaii. Their goal? To disrupt what should have been a relaxed gathering with Eminem, Snoop Dogg, and Dr. Dre. What was supposed to be a peaceful vacation turned into anything but. The entire vibe flipped the moment they touched down. Instead of sunbathing and sipping cocktails, the group found themselves on high alert, bracing for a possible confrontation. Everyone involved, Eminem, Snoop, Dre, and their wives, had to gear up like they were heading into battle. Bulletproof vests became part of their daily wardrobe, and firearms were kept close by, just in case. The situation was so tense that even the Honolulu Police Department had to get involved, assigning officers to shadow Eminem and the rest of the crew for protection. Big Naz later opened up about just how surreal the experience was. We thought it was going to be a vacation, he said, but it turned into a huge problem. We had our wives with us, some people even brought their kids. The second we got off the plane, it was chaos. Honolulu police had to escort us, and we were rushed to a transport van with everyone, kids, wives, and all. However, despite all this tension, it's highly likely that if Suge Knight had ever laid a hand on Eminem, he would have faced serious consequences, thanks to Eminem's connection to the Samoan gang. And Suge Knight definitely had a good reason to be cautious of the Samoans. Like we mentioned earlier, these guys weren't playing around. They were known for being one of the most serious and dangerous gangs out out there. The gang, known as Sons of Samoa, SOS, got its start back in the mid-1980s in Long Beach, California. Over time, though, their reach expanded way beyond that. By the 1990s, they had spread to Hawaii and across various parts of California, including key areas in the Bay Area like San Jose, Oakland, and Hayward. Incidentally, these were the same cities where members of the Samoa family lived, which only added to their deep connections and influence in the region. The police in Washington state had a lot to say about the SOS gang and their reputation. They were well known for using intimidation tactics to get what they wanted. Extortion was also a common move, and they weren't shy about pulling off drug rip-offs or even committing homicide when things escalated.
What kind of weapons do the gangs use? Your gang, for example? 38, 22, 357, 9, AKs. It's pretty heavy sort of artillery.
These guys weren't the type to back down from a fight either. They'd throw hands with just about any gang that crossed their path. Their most common rivals, though, were the Tongan Crips gangsters, which only added to the tension on the streets. When it came to their image, the SOS gang used a few specific symbols to represent themselves. One of their most recognizable signs was the Seattle Mariners logo, which they'd use on hats or clothing. They also had unique hand signals to show affiliation. These weren't just for show. These symbols carried weight, especially in gang-heavy areas where every sign and symbol sent a message. According to Long Beach detective Norm Sorensen, who spoke to the Los Angeles Times in 1990, the Sons of Samoa had a reputation for being an incredibly tough group, especially when they had been drinking or were under the influence of drugs. Sorensen explained that their tolerance for conflict was basically non-existent. If someone so much as looked at them the wrong way, a fight was almost guaranteed to break out. He described them as the type of gang that would fight at the drop of a hat, and their unpredictability made them even more dangerous. Their violent reputation wasn't just talk either. Stories about the SOS gang's willingness to fight and use violence spread quickly, earning them a lot of respect and fear on the streets. Whether it was intimidation, enforcing their dominance, or straight-up brawling with rival gangs, SOS had a no-nonsense approach to handling business. They made sure everyone knew they weren't a group to mess with.
Did you catch this? 100%. Samoan. Lift up your shirt, bro. Lift up your shirt. Lift up your shirt. Show your tap. Look at that. Samoan.
One thing that made the Sons of Samoa, SOS gangs, stand out was how different they were from other gangs in certain ways. Unlike most gangs, they didn't operate completely outside of traditional society. There wasn't any formal initiation process like the brutal hazing or jumping in rituals that are common in a lot of gangs. Joining SOS was more organic. Samoans came together out of necessity, driven by the need to protect themselves and each other in communities where they were a small minority. To put things into perspective, back in 2000, the entire Samoan population in Oakland was just 614 people. That's only about 0.15% of the city's population. It's no wonder they felt the need to stick together when they were such a tiny community compared to others. A friend of the Samoa family once described the gang in court records, saying it had a heavy presence in areas like San Jose and even in Samoan churches. It was in these churches that members of SOS would talk about values like respecting others, especially elders, a big part of Samoan culture. But outside of church, it was a whole different story. The same guys who were preaching respect and community inside those walls would show a much darker side when they were out in the streets.
I won't hesitate to shoot anyone.
You won't?
No, I wouldn't hesitate to shoot anyone if they come and mess with me.
Interestingly, despite how bad SOS could be at times, not everyone saw them purely as a criminal gang. For some, especially other Samoans in the area, SOS was more like a social club that brought the community together. It wasn't just about crime. It was about fostering a sense of ethnic brotherhood and looking out for one another in a world where they felt outnumbered and overlooked. For many, it was less about being a gang in the traditional sense and more about having each other's backs in a hostile environment. In the Bay Area, the Sons of Samoa operated a little differently compared to many other gangs, especially when it came to the infamous color wars that defined so much of gang life in places like Los Angeles during the 1990s. While the Bloods and Crips were going at it full force in LA, SOS in the Bay didn't seem to take those rivalries as seriously. They weren't as focused on the traditional red versus blue battles that defined so many street wars. Instead, their focus was more about their own alliances, survival, and controlling their territory. But that doesn't mean they weren't dangerous. In fact, their willingness to adapt and align with other groups when it suited them made them even more unpredictable. For example, federal prosecutors in San Jose revealed that a subset of SOS operating out of Monterey, California, had formed an alliance with a local Norteño crew called the Emder Squad. Together, these groups weren't just causing trouble, they were escalating things to a deadly level. In 2017, SOS and the Emder Squad reportedly teamed up to target rival Sureño members. They weren't just making threats or getting into small scuffles, they were actively working together to take out their enemies. In one case, they collaborated on a planned Emder of rival Sureños, showing just how tight their alliance had become. They even carried out drive-by shootings, with reports detailing how they fired multiple shots from a revolver into a Hayward home where Sureño members were staying. And it wasn't just about guns and shootings. SOS had no problem resorting to more old-school methods of intimidation and robbery. They were known to walk right up to someone, deliver a knockout punch, often referred to as the one-hitter quitter, and then strip the victim of their valuables right there on the spot. Jackets, wallets, shoes, whatever they wanted, they took. The people they targeted would often wake up dazed, beaten, and completely robbed, all while SOS walked away unbothered. One of the most chilling incidents involving the Sons of Samoa gang was the tragic Emder of 25-year-old Nolan Pamintuan, a young man who was on the brink of one of the happiest days of his life. On May 17, 1996, Nolan was preparing for his wedding to his fiancée, Rowena Pinello, which was set to take place the very next day in Daly City, near San Francisco. He had planned everything down to the last detail, taking an active role in organizing the big day. That evening, after spending time at his parents' house in Hayward, he had a list of errands to run for the following morning: booking a hotel room for after the wedding, picking up tuxedos for himself and his groomsmen, and helping his Aunt Edith with wedding preparations. But instead of waking up to a day of joy and celebration, Nolan became the victim of an unspeakable nightmare. That night, as he stepped out of his car in Hayward, he caught the attention of a group of men driving by in a stolen van. Timing, in this case, was everything. If Nolan had been just 2 minutes faster or slower, he might have avoided their notice altogether. But as fate would have it, the men saw him, targeted him on the spot, and decided to rob him. At gunpoint, Nolan was kidnapped, forced into their van, and driven around the Bay Area while his captors stripped him of all his possessions. As if that wasn't terrifying enough, the situation took an even darker turn. The men began arguing among themselves about who would off Nolan. Despite Nolan's desperate pleas for his life, their decision was merciless. He was shot once in the chest with a sawed-off shotgun and left to die in the middle of a street in Hayward. His lifeless body was discovered shortly after midnight, on what was supposed to be his wedding day. The news of Nolan's death sent shockwaves through the community, devastating his friends, family, and especially his fiancée Rowena. She was informed of his Emder just half an hour before the wedding was scheduled to begin, turning what should have been the happiest day of their lives into a day of unimaginable grief. What made the crime even more senseless was how sloppy the perpetrators were. They left clues everywhere, holding on to easily identifiable stolen items, keeping clothing splattered with Nolan's blood, and making no real effort to cover their tracks. Detectives had no trouble piecing the case together, and within 10 days, 4 suspects were arrested. The group included 2 juveniles, an 18-year-old, and a 22-year-old man who was believed to be the shooter. As it turned out, 3 of them were members of the Sons of Samoa gang. During the trial, 2 of the suspects cooperated with authorities, turning informants in exchange for 16-year prison sentences. The other 2, including the suspected shooter, were convicted and remain locked up to this day. Yet, despite their reputation for violence, stories have surfaced over the years that paint a more complicated picture of the gang. Some say SOS wasn't all bad and that there were times when they stepped up to help people in need, sometimes even those who weren't affiliated with the gang. And from what we now know, Eminem was one of the individuals who benefited from their support.